episodes of uh, TMV TV. I'm joined today with Jodie McIntyre, uh, who came so close to defeating Jess Phillips at the last general election. Um, but before I knew Jodie for his work in electoral politics, my first introduction to Jodie was actually his work as a Muslim doing disabled rights activism, as well as his very famous student right activism work in the early 2010s as well. Today, since it's our first episode, really, we wanted to reflect on the last 8 months or so of the Labour government. And the reason I wanted to talk to Jodie in particular um, was because seems to be a pattern emerging, Jodie. That is, the the Labour Party seems to be very intent on attacking the most vulnerable in society, and in particular, um, the disabled, with two prominent bills. Right, number one, cuts to personal independent payments, which are benefits which help people who have disabilities live independently. I think that's really important for people to remember. They're not, just out of work benefits. They're there to help people live independent lives. And then secondly, this assisted suicide bill, which they're looking to push through with very little safeguards and protection for the most vulnerable in society. Um, how do you reflect on the last 8 months and the attitude of this Labour government?
Well, I saw a post from the Labour Party today regarding the upcoming local elections on May 1st, and they're encouraging people to vote for change, as they put it. But there's only so long that you can keep talking about change because Labour are the government now. There's only so long they can talk about the Conservatives' legacy and the mistakes of the government that came before them. The fact is that people do want a change now. They want a change of government. I think that they are going to find that out in quite stark terms at these local elections, at next year's local elections, and at the next general election, whenever that is. Now, I knew that Starmer's regime was going to be bad, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad, in the sense that they have managed to unite the country in their disliking of them. So, we have many different groups in society who have different concerns and different policies that matter to them. Some people, for some people, the main concern is the genocide taking place in Gaza, in Palestine, with the backing and not only complicity but collaboration of our own government. Some people are very concerned about the state of the healthcare system in Britain. Some people are very concerned about what they see as an uncontrolled migration system into this country. But what they're all united on is that the Starmer government is the worst ever. It's simply the worst ever. Now, in terms of what you've mentioned about their targeting of disabled people, this should come as no surprise to anyone. We told people this during the election campaign. I really hope and I believe that anyone who may have still been under the illusion that Labour had something to offer them or that Labour would improve their quality of life in any way, I believe that that illusion has now been shattered. So they're a total nightmare. they're a total nightmare. Unfortunately, under the system we have, we're going to have to wait for a few years to get rid of them. It's simply a matter of when now rather than if.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I've been, the last few days in discussions with different organizations, different backgrounds about this assisted. I mean, they call it assisted dying. It's very clear as an assisted suicide bill here. Um, and at the same time, when our NHS is in disrepair and they're cutting personal independent payments to try and shove through a very poorly thought bill. Well, a quick, really quick, interesting story. So Naz Shah, the MP for Bradford West, is one of the only MPs in Parliament with a disability. It's not a visible one, but she requires a hearing aid. This bill is so poorly thought out. And during the scrutiny stage of the bill, she was forced to leave, even despite being the biggest critic in that room, because they didn't adjust based on the fact that her hearing aid only had limited battery. Now, if they can't even do this correctly for a parliamentarian and give them the grace, then how are they going to give the grace to an ordinary Joe, working class British person, who unfortunately in an overwhelmed NHS, who may be forced due to external pressure, due to family pressure, or just to feel simply feeling like a burden, which is like a natural feeling towards the end of one's lives, to not take that option. And as someone
Well,
who is obviously disabled, what do you think about their strategy on this?
the sponsor of the bill, Kim Ledbetter, said that feeling a burden might actually be an acceptable reason for someone to kill themselves with the assistance of the state. So, as you said, I think most people can agree that whether through deliberate negligence or not, the NHS is in a dire state of need. But now, on top of all the other challenges facing the NHS, they're now going to be expected to run a state suicide service, or, which I think is more likely to be the case, are we going to have a privatized suicide service? Now, this is actually an issue that is, from what I've read and from what I've heard, something that terrifies millions of disabled people in this country, whether they're religious or not. And my experience as a disabled person growing up was that my voice was often ignored or not heard. So the idea that a vulnerable person, listen, if one vulnerable person is pressured in any way to take their own life, then that should disqualify the bill in itself. And the evidence from every other country that has implemented this type of legislation is that it's not one person who's pressured into it, it's many. Now, the problem is that faces this legislation, as well as any other legislation that the government is passing, is that people don't trust the government. People don't trust Labour because they're proven, documented serial liars. So that's what makes it so scary in a sense. Our local MP in Yardley stated in an interview that she has always supported assisted suicide. And again, this kind of gets to the heart of the issue with the honesty and integrity of political candidates during election campaigns. Because I can assure you that had she announced that position more publicly during her campaign, or, for example, reminded people that, by the way, if you vote for me, one of our first pieces of legislation in government will be to make it easier and legal for people to kill themselves, then I can assure you that wouldn't have gone down very well with her local constituents.
Yeah, and on top of that, we have these kind of cuts to the personal independence payments. The Labour Party are claiming that it's a, well, the way they're phrasing it is that too many people have been on this since COVID, and just from a human perspective, I don't know if you qualify for PIP or you know people who do. How do these payments like make the lives of people with disabilities easier and make it that they can live normal lives? And what impact do you see it having on those who suffer with disability in their day-to-day life?
Well, as you mentioned, a very important point, whether it's disability living allowance or PIP, personal independence payments, these disability benefits are non-means tested, meaning we're not talking about people that are out of work. It's simply a top up or an extra amount for people with long term or severe disabilities, you could say. Now, I feel like what's wrong with these people? Out of all the sections of society you could go after, let's leave aside the issue, just for argument's sake, even though people have made the argument that the level of fraud is extremely low. Let's leave that aside for the minute. It's a question of priorities. Out of all the issues in this country, the Labour government's first priority, apart from assisted suicide, was to clamp down on disability benefits. That tells you everything you need to know about them. Now, it almost goes without saying, but if there's support for genocide, if there's support for cutting off water and electricity to the civilian population, wasn't enough to convince you of the disease, the sickness within the Labour Party, then their record since coming into power tells you everything you need to know. There's no point of talking anymore about the Conservatives and the Labour Party as diametric opposites, because they are simply not. The Labour Party have made their priorities clear, clamping down on disability benefits or cutting or reducing disability benefits is one of their priorities. We can't complain about it anymore. We can't pretend that they said one thing and then did another. This is the Labour Party of 2025. I really think they're going to learn a lesson because, for example, in my constituency in Birmingham Yardley, there are many more disabled people, disabled voters, than the margin between me and Labour. So, really and truly, I hope that disabled people use their political agency to good effect, because just that community on its own can give Labour a very good lesson.
Yeah, just one last question before we move on to talking about very importantly Gaza and reflections from the last election, which is, the argument has been made consistently by people who've remained in the Labour Party, particularly people on the left, that look, they're just doing what they need to do for the first couple of years, and then once they have enough financial leg room, they're going to hugely increase spending, like they did in the time of Tony Blair. Do you buy this argument, or do you just think that it's cope from people who are unable to accept the reality that this is a cruel, harsh government, which is just continuity Osborne is probably the best way to describe the strategy of Rachel Reeves as it is? Or do you think there will be a shift, or do you think they're just going to continue down this dangerous path?
No, I mean, this is their ideology. I don't know why they'd. If anyone is making that argument, then they're suggesting that the current Labour leadership are lying about their ideology, and they've secretly got other beliefs that they're going to make public in a couple of years. One thing is true, that whenever the next general election is, in the run up to it, we will hear a lot of rhetoric. We might possibly see some type of measures aimed to win over voters. Now, we can't, I'm hoping that we won't, but we can't remain stuck in this ridiculous system where each community is treated as a vote bank. And this has happened for years and years. And everyone knows this. The Labour Party saw Muslims as a guaranteed vote bank. The Labour Party saw disabled people. Disabled people, I don't think we even come onto their radar, to be honest. But it's the idea that these groups of people are automatically going to vote for us if we throw them a few crumbs. So it's not about, they're going to increase, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. We can see what they are doing. It's an ideological position they've taken, and it should come as a surprise to absolutely no one who's been paying attention.
Yeah. So we have local elections coming up in about, well, next few days, really, couple of days. And many people have been messaging, reaching out to us, asking what we recommend and advice. Just clarification, we're not getting involved in these year's local elections, with our focus being on 2026 predominantly. But we will see a huge rise in reform. And the more and more I talk to people, I'm trying to emphasize in this message that there is not a friction between me and reform voters, or what Muslim voters want and reform voters want. In essence, they're identifying a similar issue, which is that the country's political system is broken. The response may be very different, right? I think we can agree on that. One response is one to blame immigrants and population, etc., and the response from Muslims is more, or from ethnic minority and minority communities, to more focus on structural issues and government spending and priorities, etc. But the challenge is the same, that we live in a society which is becoming more and more unequal, where more and more money is being poured into fighting wars abroad instead of spending on our public services. And now we have in Birmingham, for example, the streets left out to rot, essentially dirty, because the Labour Council are refusing to deal with industrial action and pay workers what they did. In fact, forget pay workers what they deserve. Force upon them £8,000 pay cuts when politicians just got £5,000 pay rises, MPs. Right. So this is the moment we live in. As someone who stood in 2024, and as someone who's kind of me, as someone who's organized, I keep getting told this, and you must be getting told this from time to time again. That was a flash in the pan. It was just the Gaza ticket. If we look forward to 2026 and 2028 or 2029, do you think this is a flash in the pan, or do you think that Labour are going to suffer because of their failed policies in the next local election and national election cycle?
I can almost guarantee that between now and the next general election, the Labour government are going to get more and more unpopular. On the question of Gaza, barring a divine miracle, which I'm not ruling out, by the way, but barring that, what is going to change in Gaza? How is the situation going to improve in Gaza? This is the people now on the brink of being pushed out of their land, on the brink of starvation. In many cases, they are actually starving to death and freezing to death, particularly the children. So I don't know about you, but I feel as strongly about Palestine and the horrors being inflicted on the Palestinian people right now today as I did a year ago. So the Palestine issue isn't going away. Furthermore, it was not the only issue, it was the main issue, but it was certainly not the only issue that people cared about. And it's actually impossible, in a sense, to run a political campaign on a single issue, even though I might add that my Labour opponent, that was exactly what she did. So it's strange for us to be accused of that. But no, I just don't agree with this argument. One, because the issue of Palestine will be as prevalent in 4 years as it is now. And I can say that because I remember 4 years ago and I remember 8 years ago. That issue is not going away. And two, because Labour are failing on every other issue. If we talk about Birmingham, as you've just mentioned, I just got my council tax bill a couple of weeks ago, which has increased, but they're not collecting our rubbish. These are much smaller issues, in my opinion, but they do become frustrating over a period of time when you have an inefficient, such a ridiculous council. And as I've mentioned in the last couple of weeks, I think they should offer the bin workers, the refuse collectors, the same opportunity to vote on their own income, to vote on their own salary, as MPs voted to increase their salary to £95,000 a year. So why not make it equal? Why not say, cancel the negotiations? We're now going to give refuse workers a vote on their salary increase for the next year. So yes, that's my answer. It's not a flash in the pan. People who sincerely care about issues do not suddenly forget about them the next day.
Yeah, I think that there's just one final kind of strand of thought that I want to reflect on, and it is Gaza, right? I want to just talk about Gaza for the last 5 minutes because it's not an issue that we have forgotten about. We still see. I saw perhaps the worst video I've seen since the start of the genocide yesterday, which is saying something of a young girl whose head had been caved in by a bomb, and she's holding it like, um, and brought me to physical tears. And so we haven't forgotten about the genocide occurring in Gaza, and obviously, the excellent documentary on the BBC has come out with Louis Theroux, who, in his genius again, has once again let the group expose themselves. Um, and the godmother of the settler movement in Israel expose her and her pure hatred of just human life that is not Jewish, it seems. And we see this happening, yet we see David Lammy meeting with the Israeli foreign minister. We see this happening, yet only a handful of arms licenses were suspended. And we welcome the handful suspended, but it should be a total ban by now. And we see the continuation of flights, of reconnaissance flights from British airplanes, and these are reports, strong reports, but just in case they want to sue me, I'm saying these are reports of reconnaissance flights going from Cyprus, from British army bases over Israel consistently, over and over again, and Declassified
Over
have done
Gaza.
excellent work on this.
Over Gaza.
Yes, over Gaza, yeah. So, you know, it's it's clear that they have shown a moral cowardice on this issue, despite what the Zionist lobby might want to claim. Why do you think it is that they continue to refusing to act? Because we're not in America where Donald Trump is getting bribed hundreds of millions of pounds. There is a Zionist lobby, but the numbers are much smaller. Do you think it's a hangover of the Corbyn era and the fear of being called anti-Semites, or do you just think that it's moral cowardice from Starmer, Lamy, and his fellow leaders in the party?
Well, Keir Starmer said that he supports Zionism without qualification. I remember last time the Labour Party had a leadership contest, all of the leadership candidates declaring themselves to be Zionists. The Conservative Party, for example, during the last government, 70 to 80% of their MPs were members of Conservative Friends of Israel. So they're Zionists. It's as simple as that. They believe that there should be a Jewish state in Palestine. As you mentioned, what Louis Theroux did was simply to allow Zionists to enunciate their own beliefs and their own ideology. And sometimes I think there's a thing in Britain and in other Western countries where people find it hard to believe how how twisted these individuals are and how wrong this ideology is. It's a supremacist ideology, and it's a belief that any Jewish person in the world, or any person with a Jewish grandparent, for example, has the right to go and live in Palestine tomorrow. But that a Palestinian person whose family were kicked out of their homes a few decades ago, even if that family have been living there for generations and generations, do not have the right to return to their homes. So, unfortunately, the British political class has totally bought into this supremacist ideology. So, I think it's really a case now of believing people when they describe their own views. So Keir Starmer is an unqualified Zionist. He supports it no matter what. So in the same way that if someone said they were an unqualified supporter of apartheid in South Africa, which was another supremacist ideology, we would oppose them and we would actually categorize that person as a racist. I think the same should be applied to any politician or any person who supports Zionism because it's a racist, supremacist ideology. So it's a combination of reasons. As you mentioned, the lobby in Britain might not be as big as in the US, but it is still a powerful lobby. And furthermore, particularly in the last, say, decade or couple of decades, this is a subject we would need to speak about in a lot more detail. But there's been an intertwining of the British and Israeli intelligence services to the extent that just in a report released today, there is evidence that the Metropolitan Police in London were sharing data and information with the Israeli embassy uh, about a about surveillance or a case they had against people who were protesting at Israeli arms factories. So, it's really something that is growing by the year. And I like to mention a story about when Mossad agents were found guilty of assassinating a Palestinian cartoonist in London. And in response to that, Margaret Thatcher closed down a Mossad base in London and expelled a number of Israeli diplomats because she was so. I'm not saying Margaret Thatcher was anti Israel in any way, but she was appalled that this attack had taken place on British soil. Now, I don't think there's anything that could happen under the sun today that would push Keir Starmer to expel Israeli diplomats. So that's how far we've come.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jody. I just a final word, because we have titled this "The Labour's War on Disabled People," and I do really feel like it is a direct attack on the disabled that we are seeing currently in society. So we've sent out email blasts recently. Um, go to Beamer's website. There are plenty of open letters that you can templates that you can use to send to your MPs opposing this assisted suicide bill. It's really urgent you do. It's going to come to Parliament in the next 6 weeks or so. Once recess is done, and it's really important that we oppose this bill because it will set a dangerous precedent. And this doesn't take away the human element of being certain individuals who do desire this. But unfortunately, the reality is the net harm of this bill will be catastrophic. And it will only be the most vulnerable in society that pay the price for this. Right? It will be only the most vulnerable who end up paying the cost for this terrible decision making, this cowardly decision making from a Labour government, who are cutting PIP, who have done decent work on the NHS, but still an NHS which was in deep, deep crisis. To bring such a bill at this moment is absolutely reckless, and a sign of moral cowardice.
What I found so shocking about the assisted suicide bill is that I've never seen such a unanimous opinion amongst disabled people and amongst major disability organizations, and the sum total of the response to that overwhelming feeling from the government was zero. So I'm sorry to say, but that is now the weight our opinion carries as disabled people. So as you said, we need to pressure them as much as we can on this issue and really remind people, anytime there's a vote, anytime there's an election in future, just remember the first thing the Labour government were trying to pass was an assisted suicide bill, a bill to make it easier for people to kill themselves. That was their first priority. And for any disabled people who are worried about this, rest assured, all of the people on this side of the argument, we will do everything we can to fight against it. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Apologies. It's like when you're at school and the teachers don't know how to use the laptop. No, the someone's just commented saying Labour's war on disabled, been here, seen it, done it, and suffered it. They have included the description of white disabled, shockingly, but let's take it as Labour's war on the disabled, and they suffered from it. is absolutely, it's a tragedy. Um, whatever ethnicity the disabled may come from, and it is our ethical responsibility. Even if someone's racist to us, by the way, I don't care if an individual does not like me as a Muslim or does not like me as an Indian in the UK. If they are being targeted by the government because they have a disability, then it is my ethical duty to go and stand up for them, right? Whether they hate me or they love me, my ethical obligation as a human is to stand up for those who are vulnerable. So we'll continue to stand up for you, sir, even if you have made that specification.
On that point as well, my worry with obviously I would say that reform are hugely popular now, and I'm quite sure that they're going to do very, very well in upcoming local and general elections. My problem is that they're not going to do what people are voting them in to do. I think a lot of people are voting for reform to curb immigration into Britain, to stop the boats, to use a colloquial term. But reform are not going to do that. So what's going to happen after that? Who's going to be the next salesman of the next political party to promise that they're going to ease people's problems and challenges by stopping the boats? It, it's a dishonest trick that they're using to manipulate people into voting for them. But it has worked and it is going to work. But that's my worry on that issue, is that it's actually going to lead to even more frustration and even more disillusionment with the political class, because they are identifying a problem by offering a full solution that even Nigel Farage has admitted in his words is a political impossibility. He said it's a political impossibility to, deport millions of people as they've been talking about. But they're very popular. And the problem is, one thing I read, for example, regarding the local elections, is that they've already won. If you look at the election in the by-election in Runcorn, I saw the Reform candidate and the Labour candidate both talking about closing down the local migrant hotel, as they termed it. So they've really shifted the political narrative in that regard. But Labour have enabled this. Labour have totally contributed and continue to contribute to the rise of this uh, narrative, and this is the result.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up there, Jody. It's a stark reminder to us all that we need to organize. It can't just be left up to individuals like Jody or to organizations like the Muslim Vote. We must organize across coalitions to build a better society that protects all, whether it be refugees or the disabled. Thank you very much. This hopefully will be the start of a regular series, which we'll be doing every week. And I hope Jody will become a regular guest. But on that note of Jody, quickly, do you want, as a final thing, do you want to plug Hajj sale, what you're doing, what you're raising money for, and then we'll wrap up there, inshallah.
So a team of 5 of us are sailing from the UK to Hajj to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. It's the first ever Hajj sail from the UK. It's incredibly difficult and challenging journey, but it's for a very good cause. We're raising money for orphans, the most vulnerable people in the world, in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in other countries as well. We've raised £185,000 so far, but we're aiming for 500,000. Whatever people can donate makes a difference, and they have a team of volunteers on the ground in Gaza currently, distributing the aid. So if anyone wants to donate, you can go to hajsale.com and do so.
جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.